Throughout history, many groups of people have wanted to keep what they're doing not known to the public, and one of the most famous groups that did this was the Sons of Liberty. Welcome to episode 27 of Dyllon Explains Everything. My name's Dyllon, and in case you couldn't tell by the title, I'm the one explaining everything, including the topic of today, the Sons of Liberty. I'm going to be running through a lot of facts, so if you're curious as to where I get my information, be sure to check the description below for a list of links. Back in the mid-1700s, America was still known as the 13 Colonies and was owned by the British. With the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, having just happened, Britain acquired a bunch of new territory in the modern Midwest. And they also got peace with the Native Americans there. The problem is, the point of this war was to acquire territory that the 13 colonies wanted in order to expand their cities and colonies. We could look at this from two different perspectives. The first one being the British, or the Loyalists, the colonists that wanted to stay with Britain, point of view. They thought that they accomplished the goal. They acquired the land. Even though they couldn't take any of it and settle there because of the peace treaty with the Native Americans there, they still acquired the land, and at the end of the treaty, they could still potentially take the land. They also did exactly what America wanted in this fashion. They were able to get the land just like the colonists were asking for. And they spent their own money for it. So of course they're going to start taxing the colonists. The Patriot point of view, or the people who wanted the colonies to get independence, thought that the British made a false promise and that they shouldn't even be ruling in the first place, yet they promised this land which they couldn't even settle in now, which was the whole point of getting it. They also thought that having to pay for this war was stupid, considering that they didn't even get what they wanted out of it. This is exactly what caused the American Revolution. The colonists wanted independence for stupid taxation, in their opinion, from the British, though the British thought that they were taxing for a good reason. They paid for this war that America wanted. They accomplished the war and did it and got what the goal was. Even though they can't settle there, they still have the land technically. Within the Patriots, there was a small group of people known as the Loyal Nine. These were the 9 founders of the Sons of Liberty. They were Freemasons that thought that the colonies should be independent of British rule, and they set up some plans to make that happen. The Loyal Nine were mad about a new tax called the Stamp Act. Basically, it taxed all paper products because the British needed money in order to fund the 7 Years' War that had just happened. The problem is, the Loyal Nine thought that this was stupid that they were getting taxed for this, just like we discussed with the Patriots' point of view. The taxman in their area was Andrew Oliver. So they sent a letter to this guy basically saying, if you don't come and meet us under this Liberty Tree, we're gonna kill you. So he showed up and decided to quit his job right then and there in front of everyone, allowing everyone to know who the Loyal Nine were and starting the Sons of Liberty. As the Sons of Liberty expanded, they stretched across the entire 13 colonies. They had one main goal: get independence from Britain as soon as possible, and they had plans to make it happen. Skipping ahead a bit, a few major things happened, the first of which is the British East Indies. Now, this company has been around for a while, and I do have a video on this, but in case you missed that, basically Britain owned a bunch of territory in India and started trading along the Indian Ocean, especially with Southeast Asia, and especially with China, who they sold many things to, including opium. The problem is China had an opium epidemic, so they banned all opium imports. But the British still snuck opium into the country on ships loaded with tea. But first, normally, they sent these ships to the colonies. The second big thing that happened was the Boston Massacre, but before I get to that, I need to explain what led up to it. After the 7 Years' War, they had to do a bunch of taxes. The second big one was the Townshend Act, and this led to a bunch of patriots being really angry. In fact, the patriots started forming mobs that would attack loyalists, and at one point, they decided to destroy a loyalist store. But in the process, another loyalist came out and tried shooting in order to get them to stop. The problem was the bullet hit an 11-year-old kid and he died. A few more Patriot attacks happened, but they all ended pretty painlessly except for one, the Boston Massacre. On March 5th, 1770, some patriots gathered around the customs house in Boston, which basically held a bunch of the king's money. It was guarded by one loyalist guard. Now, this mob of patriots started basically harassing him, yelling things at him, throwing things at him. So in retaliation, he decided to strike one with his bayonet. This made them even angrier, so they started throwing snow at him, ice, and gathering more patriots to harass him. So he decided to call in reinforcements as well. They were trying to end it with peace, but death was inevitable. After the mob started attacking the loyalists with clubs, it was pretty easy to tell what was going to happen, but there's a few theories as to what actually happened. The first one is that someone yelled fire and all the soldiers started firing. The second theory is that someone misfired, so everyone just followed suit and started shooting. There is a third theory, but I'll get to that in a second. Basically, it ended with the loyalists killing 5 patriots and wounding 6 by shooting at them. The third theory that I want to mention is that the Sons of Liberty had a hand in the Boston Massacre. Basically, there's some evidence that points to a figure who was standing outside the Commons House on the day of the Boston Massacre. He was standing in a cloak and a bunch of patriots came to talk to him. He was telling them his plan. After this happened about 3 times, they started gathering around the Customs House and harassing the soldier. This is what caused the Boston Massacre. Later, one of the Sons of Liberty, or at least someone who worked with the Sons of Liberty, actually sued the Loyalists there, and they won. So it's possible that the Sons of Liberty were doing this specifically to get leverage on the Patriots and earn some money. The final thing that set up the independence of America and the end of the Sons of Liberty was the Boston Tea Party. In a Freemason lodge near the port in Boston, the Sons of Liberty came up with a plan. They dressed up like Native Americans so that when people saw them executing their plan, they wouldn't know who they were. They didn't necessarily think people would blame the Native Americans, but it was worth a try. The British were still trying to make up for money lost in the 7 Years' War, so there was a tea act going on that basically taxed all non-British tea to the colonists. So, the Boston Tea Party, which they were setting up for, was a complete retaliation against this. They had a main goal, to dump out all the tea in the port, and they were successful. They climbed on a boat, and they started dumping out tea, opening the crates, taking out packets, throwing them in the ocean, and eventually just dumping the entire crate. This resulted in a huge economic blow to Britain, and this also sparked the Revolutionary War, which happened shortly after. But there's some questions that go unanswered. For example, why did they open all the crates and dump out the tea manually rather than just throwing the crates in the water? It would have had the same effect. And why is it important that the British East Indies exist? Well, there's a pretty interesting theory that actually has a lot of evidence and explains this pretty perfectly. Basically, it says that because of the British East Indies trading opium into China illegally and having to sneak it through America, the Sons of Liberty thought that there might be opium on the ship. This is why they opened up the crates individually, searching around them for opium. This would allow them to fund the war that they knew was inevitable, hopefully anyway, and this would explain all of the things that were kind of questionable earlier. Like I said, this is just a theory, but it does explain a lot of things and has plenty of evidence, including a sizable chunk of money that the colonists got seemingly out of nowhere from trades. This might have been the opium that they were trading away for money to fund the war. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video just as much as the Patriots like independence. And if you did, be sure to let me know and stick around for next week's video, which always comes out Saturday at 10 a.m. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions, be sure to leave them in the comments below. And remember, my name's Dylan, and I explain everything.